Essentially, what I want to cover today is really finding the right strategy for you. And I'll be going through actually a couple of slides, and more importantly, I want to spend a little bit more time actually getting into my workflow within the software MetaStock. Now, obviously, we go through a little disclaimer here. Trading is risky. If I use examples today, it's not necessarily buy or sell recommendations. So just keep that in mind. My goal is to, hopefully add to your guys' already not a large knowledge base. I want to give you some things that you can kind of think about and analyze. I know that even the most seasoned traders are always adapting, and that's a very important part to be able to continue to go out there and profit. Understanding new systems and even analyzing your own system that you have. Now, before I get too much into that, I want to get a little bit into MetaStock. I'm sure that some of you are familiar with the software MetaStock. It was founded in 1982 by Steve Michaelis. He's the author of Technical Analysis A to Z. In '95, we were actually purchased by Thomson Reuters, and we helped them release their Quote Center real-time data feed. Now, in about 2012, we actually updated to the newer version of Quote Center, which is called MetaStock Zenith, which some of you might be familiar with, the professional version of Thomson Reuters Icon, or it's very, very comparable to, let's say, a Bloomberg term. We sold a lot of copies over the course of the last 30 years. A couple of years ago, we actually divested from Thomson Reuters, and we still have a very, very good working relationship with them, but the split has allowed us to really make some large advancements in our software. Now, I think that part of that is the motivation to continue to create the best software possible and allow traders to effectively get into a workflow and be able to create their system within a software and get into a workflow, or find a system within the software and add to their current day-to-day trades. I think that's part of the reason that we've been voted the #1 technical analysis software in our class for 23 straight years here. Now, like I said a little bit earlier, today I want to cover a couple of things. I want to first off cover the importance of a trading plan. We're going to go through a little bit of understanding how to use a trading system. I'll use the MACD trading system as a very, very basic example. And then obviously I want to cover finding the right strategy for you. Now, those of you who are not familiar with the two gentlemen on the screen, Richard Dennis and William Eckhart. They are essentially they started the experiment called the turtle traders. And Richard Dennis was widely known as one of the best traders in his time in the 80s. And his thought was that trading was not a genetic gift. It was not a measure of your IQ, but it was the ability to enact a system, the ability to find something that works and continue working that system over and over again. William Eckhart was his business partner at the time, and honestly, he thought that the key to Dennis's success thus far was something, whether it be genetic or just a high IQ, or even a little bit of luck mixed in. Dennis wanted to prove him wrong, so they started one of the greatest experiments of all time within this industry. Dennis was out to prove that you could teach trading to anyone given the right system and a specific period of time, and given that student would enact that process and do it repeatedly, that they could be a successful trader. You know, they went ahead and made this bet, and Dennis put up his own money and ended up grabbing, I believe, 14 students, and he called them the Turtles. So it's the Turtle Trading System. And it is a trend-following system. Now, he taught them one-on-one for about 2 weeks, and then said, this is my system, go out and apply it. And they were very, very successful. They saw gains of over 80%. And if anything, this goes to show that it's not necessarily the person that's trading, but it's the system that they're trading. And if you're open-minded and you're able to find something that does work, test and retest it, and then follow that system, you will be successful. One of his quotes was, trading was much more teachable than I ever imagined. In a strange way, it was almost humbling. Now, what we believe here at MetaStock is that if we're able to provide the right set of tools, you're able to effectively use those tools, you can get into basically a workflow. Now, I've been with MetaStock for quite some time. I've seen many, many systems. We work with a very large number of professional traders. And what I've really noticed is there's no right or wrong way to do things. There's no one system that is the best system of all. And I think all of you know that. And the main reason, you know, the reason everyone knows that is because, hey, if there was one system out there that was the alpha system, it worked every single time, then everyone would do it. Everyone would use that system. That is not the case. I think that the one true system that does span across all markets and that will work every single time is a system that is followed consistently, that is tested, number one, but number two, repeated. Now, when I talk about repeating a system, I mean eliminating the hype and emotion out of trade. And as traders, I'm sure you guys have heard that a million times. Let's make that a million and one. We want to eliminate the hype and emotion from the trading. Now, technical analysis is relatively easy to do that. It is the hardest easy thing you will ever do. And what the real trick is finding a system that works, and you can test that system over and over again. You watch it work. Let's say that you're using a long strategy. You go long on an instrument, and it dips down a little bit in that first day, and it hasn't reached your stop losses yet, but it has gone down significantly, and you're worried. At that point, you have two choices. You can bail out on the trade, or you can follow your system and trust your analysis thus far. And I think that that's one of the defining factors is people let that fear and emotion and hype get too much into their trading strategy. And that's really not much of a strategy if you ask me. Trading requires discipline. Another quote from Richard Dennis, I always say that you could publish my trading rules in the newspaper and no one would follow them. The key is consistency and discipline. Almost anybody can make up a list of rules that are 80% as good as what we've taught our people. What they couldn't do is give them the confidence to stick to those rules even when things are going bad. And I think that you know, that's a very, very important quote. So when things start turning the other way, you use your system. You have your system for a reason. And if you test it, you should trust it if it tests well. Now, that's not to say that you should never be open to making small changes or taking bits and pieces from you know, other professional traders and other systems, etc. But what we want to stay conscious of is, are we following our rules? Are we following our system? Now, Gerald Appel created a system in the 70s called the MACD. And it is a widely accepted system. It's a trend-following system. And when we start getting into trend trading, it's a very, very widely known way to trade. It's a very popular way to trade. And that's because it's very, very basic. You follow the trend. You guys have heard sayings like rising tide floats all boats, befriend the trend, never bet against the trend. I mean, there's a million sayings out there for it, but the trend is your friend. And that's one of the things that you can start off with. Let's say that you're new to trading, or you're at a point in your life where you're revising your strategy, etc., is getting back down to basics. Now, what is a trend? I'm sure that you all know, but a trend is the general direction of a market or price of an asset. So it is the general feeling and the general direction that the market is moving. Now, a very, very common way, and I'm a very conservative trader, to be honest with you. I don't take the real aggressive moves. I don't chase down breakouts. I have my own set of rules, and I follow those rules. And a lot of them are very, very trend-based rules. You have to take a look at the way that the market is moving overall versus just trying to get those smaller profits on the breakouts, etc. And too often, people try to nail down that perfect trade. They want to get in at the very, very bottom, and they want to sell at the very, very top. Well, what they forget is that there's a lot of money to be made in between the bottom and top. And if you try to catch those moves, a lot of times you can break those rules. You can not be following the trend. You can be guessing against the market, as some say. So we want to take a look at the overall feel of the market. And this is this leads right into exactly what the MACD is. Now, some of you, I'm assuming most of you are actually familiar with what the MACD is and kind of some different interpretations. We're going to be using that as a very, very baseline system to get into today, and hopefully you can add that to your repertoire or take it in consideration, or some of you may use it as your primary trading system. Now, to cover the basics of the MACD is a 26 exponential moving average subtracted from a 12-period exponential moving average. So we're getting a little bit of a longer-term trend versus a shorter-term trend, and we're getting a feel for the direction of that. Now, for example, we have our trend lines right here at the bottom, and they can be interpreted multiple ways. The first way to look at it is where the MACD is actually crossing its signal line, which is a 9-period exponential moving average of the difference of the 26 and 12-period moving average that we were looking at earlier. Now, a couple of different interpretation methods here is when our MACD line dips below our signal line, as we can see right here, we're in a bearish market. As it starts moving up and it crosses over its signal line, we're in a bullish market. So again, we're going back to the overall general trend of the direction that the market is moving. Another way to interpret this, and I'll go back a couple of slides to illustrate it a little bit, is the moving averages are typically going to stay, pardon me, close together. As these moving averages move further and further apart, an interpretation of that is that they will, I guess you could say, rubber band back together, and it may be a good signal for a reversal of the trend. Now, what we've been able to do is take the rules of Appel's MACD system and actually implement them within the software. So instead of having to take a look at the different lines and kind of where our trend is moving and where exactly they cross, we've been actually able to put that into what we call an expert advisor, basically a system that is pre-built. As you can see, very, very simple to use, and I'll get into the software here in just a moment, but has very, very clear buy and sell signals. So let's actually get into the software here. Let me pull it up. Let's just open a chart of Microsoft. I'm just attaching the MACD Expert Advisor to it. Let's go ahead and open that chart. Clicked on the wrong one. Okay, there we go. So here we have a chart of Microsoft. Okay, we also have our MACD Expert Advisor attached. As you can see, we have all of these different signals. Now, one thing that I like to do when I attach an Expert Advisor here is I'm going to go ahead and put the indicator, especially if I'm using the MACD, I'm going to put the actual indicator above it. Okay, so we have our signal line here. Now, as you can see, and I will show you a very, very good example of the different interpretations. Now, the basic rule of a MACD is when our 12 and 26 cross, that means a reversal of the trend. For example, right here, right around the starting of April, we had a cross, and it went straight up. Now, as it went up, at the very, very top, you guys see how the two moving averages actually started separating. And what this was a very, very good signal that there would be a reversal in the trend. And we did have that. So our moving averages ended up crossing right here. And this is what generated our MACD sell signal. Now, one of the things that we've been able to do in MetaStock very, very effectively is input well over 50 expert systems within the software right off the bat. Now, typically, if I'm a beginning trader and I get into MetaStock, my first, once I start getting into a workflow, my first steps are to find a system that works for me, and then later on down the road, I'm going to tweak that system and maybe overall change that system. Now, you do have the ability to go ahead and build your own system within MetaStock, but if you're starting out or you need a little guidance, a step up versus just reading a bunch of books or watching a ton of webinars, this system actually will walk you through with commentary. And what I want to do here is give you a good idea of what the commentary looks like. Oops, I think that is on a different screen. I believe my commentary is actually on a different screen. What we're looking at here essentially is, sorry guys, there we go. It was hiding from me. So our expert commentary, what we're able to do is actually take a look at these signals. Now, this expert commentary is available on all of our expert systems. Now, I'll zoom in here so you can actually see the signals a little bit easier. Right here, you actually are able to see this little black arrow. That's what day that the commentary is actually illustrating. Now, the commentary itself is actually going to explain the methodology behind the system to you and walk you through the rules to start off with. But if we want to take a look at an actual signal, I'll go ahead and click on, let's say, this buy signal right here. Currently, the MACD is bullish since it is trading above its signal line, as we see here. Since the MACD crossed its moving average, Microsoft has been unchanged and ranged from 43.7 to a low of 42. So we're looking at this, and based off of these signals, we can start establishing some guidelines. Now, the MACD typically is a little bit of a lagging indicator because it is a trend following indicator. So you're going to look for the confirmation signals. So if you notice, we have our cross right here, and the next day we're getting a confirmation signal from it to go along. Now, as we're looking at this, let's say that I was considering a long position for Microsoft. I'm going to look at first off, our moving averages are below the signal line, but they are moving up. So the trend is moving up. But as we can see, as we start kind of flattening out right around this area, our moving averages have started to separate. Now, as they separate, and like we were talking about a little bit earlier, that could be a good indication that we're looking at a possible market reversal. Such was the case right here when we were on a MACD sell signal. We came down, it was trading below its signal line, our moving averages separated, and then lo and behold, they turned as the market changed directions. Now, the MACD is a very, very comprehensive system, but it's also very, very simple. It has very plain rules, and we're able to graphically show you those rules through the buy and sell signals within MetaStock. Now, one thing I did want to tell you guys, if you have questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box, and I'll do my very best to answer them as I go along here. You know, I definitely like taking questions, and you know, so don't hesitate whatsoever. Now, the MACD is a very it's a very good system, but I'm not here to sell you the MACD system. I'm here to show you how to find the right system for you. Now, within MetaStock, we have something called the system tester. Now, the system tester is one of our power tools, and let me just get out of this screen here. Now, our power console is designed so that you can find your power tools very, very easily. Let's go to, first off, you have obviously your charting tool. You have an exploration tool, which if we have time, I'll get into a little bit more. But I want to concentrate a little bit on the system tester tool itself. Now, this can be used one of two ways. First off, if you already have a system that you trade, for example, you already trade the MACD, you can test the MACD expert trading system across thousands of instruments. You can test it across over 4,200 optionable stocks if you want, and get a good idea of exactly how it trades across these instruments. Because let's be honest, and I'm sure that everyone has noticed this, every instrument trades a little bit differently. Every system trades a little bit different versus the instrument. So what we want to do is we want to pair the two. We want to find either a instrument that trades very well with the system, or a system that trades very well with the instrument that we follow. So the system tester actually works in both those ways. But what I want to concentrate on is finding the right system for you. So we can actually go in here, and this top box actually shows you all of the expert systems, and you'll have well over 50 to start off with within MetaStock. We also have many additional ones that were created by various professional traders that we do work with. Let's say that first off we have our MACD selected here. Let's say that we also use stochastics. We use our trend analysis. Let's take a look at our volatility analysis. And let's see. Let's take a look at Bollinger Bands, the expert system. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've selected a number of systems to start off with, because I want to get a good feel of what system is working the best. Now, in this specific case, I want to test all of these systems against one instrument. We just took a look at Microsoft. So let's go ahead and bring up Microsoft again. Now over here I'm able to establish basically what kind of trader I am, and establish some trade rules. For example, if I take just long trades, just short trades, or both, and I'll go ahead and select both. I can go ahead and come in here into our trade options and make this as realistic as possible. Keep in mind that we're identifying a system that we are going to continue using consistently. So that strategy has to be as realistic as possible. So I can come in here and I can account for my brokerage fees, I can account for my margin requirements, my commissions, I can account for slippage. Here, just for the just for the presentation, we'll pretty much leave everything the same here. So go ahead and click OK. I'm going to go ahead and start the system test. Now the system tester is going through 250 records, basically a trading year, to identify how well each of these systems did against Microsoft. So if we go ahead, and it's already done, so let's take a look at it. So we tested 7 total systems against 1 instrument. Now keep in mind you can actually do it across multiple instruments as well. You can also, once you decide that you want to trade just the MACD, you can test that across multiple instruments. But for our subject today, we want to take a look at what system is going to work best for us. Now I'm going to come over here to the important column, and that is best profit. So I'm going to go ahead and sort it by best profit. Pardon me just 1 second. So as we take a look here, there's actually a number of profitable systems. The majority of the systems that we tested against Microsoft, they tested very well. Pretty much everything's in the green except for stochastics and trend analysis. Now if we take a look at the MACD expert system, actually it really wasn't that effective. So if I have, let's say, Bollinger Bands, if I am a firm believer in the relative strength or stochastics, and I've been looking into the MACD system and looking to implement that, I'm going to take a look at this screen and visually right off, I'm going to say, you know what, it really didn't work on Microsoft that well, so maybe I should take a look at a different system. Maybe I should take a look at the relative strength. Now, trading on the relative strength, we did very, very well over the year. We created about $1,500 worth of profit. Let's take a look at that a little bit more in detail. Now, our performance we can take a look at right here, and a couple of things that I like to focus on is how to trade the instrument. For example, actively trading this system, I profited $1,500. If I had just bought and held Microsoft as a long-term asset over the course of the year, I would have only made about $213. So this is definitely an instrument that I would want to be actively trading. Also, coming down here at the trade summary, something very important to look at is your total trades. Now, when you start trading, you have to set some expectations. You have to get a good idea of exactly what type of trader you're going to be. If you have a 40-hour-a-week job, if you have kids, if you have a lot of activities, chances are you're not going to want to sit in front of a computer for 3, 4, 5 hours a day. So your trades are going to be held to a minimum. If you're a person that is a full-time trader and you place 3 or 4 trades a day, you're looking for a much more active system, something that's going to get you in and out in a short period of time, but it's going to capture that amount of profit steadily. If you are one of those individuals like myself that doesn't have the opportunity to sit in front of the screen all day and make trades, then if I see this number as low, I'm in 4 total trades over the course of a year. Maybe that's not as active as I'd really like to be, but I'm looking at this system and saying, hey, I only had to place 4 trades, and I made $1,500 off of it. So those positions paid off. I had I traded very, very effectively. My trade efficiency, in fact, was 62%. I had, and I'm taking a look at our profitable trades, and it looks like all 4 of our trades that we made here were profitable. We had 2 long trades and 2 short trades, so we were really following the trend here. I could take a look at my unprofitable trades, if there were any. I can take a look at a lot of details, and I could bore you with all the percentages and the details here, but I want to kind of cruise through this so we can get into a little bit more of a workflow with this. So here you could see all of your trade profit, your losses, your commissions, etc. I can take a look at the individual orders here. I can take a look at my positions there. Now, the equity tab here, this is something that I like to really take a look at when I am doing a system test. This is basically going to be a summation of what my money has done over the course of the last year. So if my money is trending up like this, that's very, very good news. That means that obviously my account is continuing to go up. If we go back for a moment and let's take a look at our worst performer, and we take a look at the equity line. Well, we weren't trading that entire time, and then we traded a couple of times and lost a couple of money, or a bunch of money, rather. Trying to show you a good example of an equity line. He's kept us out for quite a while. Let's take a look at our MACD. Let's see how our MACD fared. This is a good example of what I don't want to see my money doing. If I look at an account and we're out of the market here, but then we got very, very volatile, and we have no established trend here. So I lost a significant amount and then ended up coming back, but I want a system that's going to consistently work over a long period of time. I can take a look at the MACD and say that, right off, that's not it. Now, just out of curiosity, we only made $29 off of 23 total trades. That's not very efficient at all. I don't want to place 23 trades and only make $29. That's a horrible efficiency rating, and honestly, that would be terrible as a trader to go through that. Now, your losing trades, you can always have more losing trades than you have winning trades, just as long as your winning trades are bigger than your losing trades. So losing is part of the game. Let's say that we place 10 trades and we lose 6 of them. Right off the bat, that's a 60% loss ratio. That doesn't sound good. However, if we made a $10,000 profit on each of those 4 winning trades, and we only lost a few $100s on the 6 losing trades, then that is a very, very good trade efficiency. And that is really where sticking to a system and sticking to a set of rules is going to come into play. And that is being able to take those 6 losses in stride, knowing that the next 4, the next 5, or the next 2, you're going to make all of your money back and more. So being able to understand that concept of you don't have to win them all, you just have to win a lot on a few of them, that's going to be very, very important here. Now, what we've done is we've gone through and we've established that our relative strength really is the best way to go as far as the MACD. But my question is, does it test well on other instruments? Or once I've found a system that works for me, I want to be able to find instruments that are trading well on that. Now, to do that, there's over, for example, if you trade options, there's over 4,000 optionable stocks out there. That's a lot of time within a chart. The best way to do it is to take a look at a large number of instruments and be able just to cruise through them very quickly and see if you're generating any signals. That's where our scanner tool or our exploration tool comes into play. So instead of cruising through, let's say 500 charts, if we're looking across the S&P 500, I want to be able just to pick out the ones that were generating a signal. So I can come down here. This top window is, again, all of the systems. I can come down here. We were taking a look at the relative strength index expert system. And I'm going to go ahead and pick, let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and pick the, let's say, the S&P 500. So 500 instruments, and let's go ahead and click on the summary screen. Okay, so we are going through 502 instruments using the relative strength index expert system. And if you ever forget what this system is, if you actually hover over it, it will cover exactly what it is looking for, what the system is. So if I go ahead and start the exploration here, what this is doing, and you can see the status, is it's going through all 500 instruments and it's looking for a signal based off of the relative strength index expert system. While this does it, I'm going to grab a drink of water just real quick. Now it's going to take a very short period of time, but already we can see that it's rejecting a lot. If we're looking at a system that barely generates signals, and a lot of them do. A lot of them are not very general systems. Some of them are looking at something very, very, very specific. So generating a signal based off of the relative strength index is one of those. MACD, for example, is going to be a very, very broad, searching tool, essentially. Let's see here. I think it got stuck on my other monitor. Give me just 1 second. Switched monitors here, and the actually got stuck there. Sorry about this. Let's see what screen it is on. Okay, let's go ahead and pull up the Power Console again. So when looking at the system, and I apologize, it's actually on my other screen here. I can't quite get it over. When looking at these systems, what we want to do is be able to have a system that is consistent. But that doesn't mean necessarily it's going to work on one instrument consistently. So in looking at the exploration tool, what this allows us to do is actually go through a significant amount of instruments to really whittle it down to find the instruments that work for us. Now, once we have a system that or rather the exploration finished, we can actually come back in here into the system tester, and it doesn't look like we returned anything anyway on that last report, but we can actually test the relative strength index against a large amount of instruments. So let's take a look across the S&P. Let's just do the 100. And we're going to run the relative strength index and test that system against 100 instruments. Now, in looking at this, what we're able to do is find essentially the pattern. Now, once we have found a system that works well for us, we can start establishing rules like how are we going to enter the trade? How are we going to exit the trade? And I think that really the most important rule is exiting the trade. Being a trade manager is probably one of the most important things that you can be out there, because obviously you want to be careful with your money. So if we go across, and it looks like when we were looking at Microsoft a little bit earlier, that is the best performing instrument. We can take a look at Citigroup and MetLife. And what this is telling me is, based off of the relative strength index, basically these larger instruments are actually pulling a lot of the weight of these indices. So if we're looking at an index and we're following the relative strength index, when our index moves, that means that the weighted instruments within that index are pulling it in that direction. And that is the case with some of our more heavily weighted instruments like our Microsoft, Citigroup, MetLife, etc. So when those instruments are going up, they have more weight, therefore they're pulling that index up or down with them. Now, that again is a large rule to follow as far as following the trend. Now, longer term investments and following the trend, that is something that will be very, very consistent. It is something that you can build off of as your trading system. Now, I think the most important thing to take away from this is really finding that workflow. Finding a workflow that works for you. For example, once you have your system, if you're using MetaStock, the first thing that you're going to come in here and do is you're going to run an exploration. Now, if you are a long-term trader, running an exploration once a week or once a day is fine. To be honest with you, I don't run our exploration more than once a day if I'm doing longer-term trades, because there's really just no point to it. Now, once I find a list of instruments, and they're not stuck on my other screen, once I find a list of instruments that are generating a signal based off of that system, I'm going to take that system and I'm going to test those instruments just to make sure that everything is lining up correctly. Now, at that point, then you have the ability to establish your trading rules and get into an entry or add it to a watch list and wait for a confirmation. So sticking to your trading plan, finding that trading plan and sticking to it long term is going to be the key. I've seen chart after chart after chart that has stochastics and Bollinger Bands and Gann fans and Fibonacci retracements and trend lines and just a ton of stuff on it. And when it comes down to it, some traders can trade like that effectively, but don't be afraid to identify simple rules. As long as you stick with those rules and follow them religiously, then you can be successful. And I think that that was the basis, and that was why the turtle trade method worked so well. And we actually do have that method built within MetaStock as well. I'll open it up here to questions in just a moment. First off, I want to thank Investor Inspiration again for having us. MetaStock, if you have any questions about our system, I'll try to put it in the chat here. But if you have any questions, feel free to visit us at metastock.com. We do have live chat where you can ask questions to any of our representatives. They can help you. So it's www.metastock.com.